I kept the box in my lap the whole drive home from the housewarming party, holding it the way you hold something you almost lost forever. My late husband built that box the winter before he died, his last project. And my daughter-in-law had just set it outside on the front porch, among the shoes and the recycling bins, with a sticky note that said donate. I didn't make a scene. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just walked out the front door, picked it up off the cold concrete, and put it in my car. That night, my son called me, voice cracking in a way I hadn't heard since his father's funeral. "Mom," he said, "was there something inside that box? I want to tell you everything." But to understand why that question broke something open in me, the good kind of broken, the kind that lets light in, you need to know where that box came from. You need to know what my husband put inside it before he got sick. And you need to understand that when my daughter-in-law set it out with the recycling, she had no idea she was throwing away something my husband had been quietly planning for 23 years. My husband's name was Warren. We were married for 38 years, and I loved him the way you love someone who makes the ordinary feel like enough. He wasn't loud about things. He didn't make speeches or write long letters. He built things. When our boys were little, he built a treehouse in the backyard that outlasted 2 different families after us. When we moved to the smaller place in Asheville after the boys left home, the first thing he did was set up his wood shop in the garage. Every Saturday morning, I'd hear the radio on out there, old country music, and the smell of cedar would drift through the kitchen window while I had my coffee. He started the box when our younger son, I have to back up. When I found out our older son, Elliot, was going to have a baby. That was 2019. Warren was 64 and in good health, or so we thought. He went into the shop the week after Elliot called with the news, and he didn't come out until dinner. When I asked what he was working on, he said, "A welcome gift." It took him 6 weeks. I saw it once before finished it, small, about the size of a shoebox, made from cherry wood he'd been saving since our youngest was born. He'd carved something into the lid. I didn't get a close look before he waved me off, laughing. He was protective of his work until he was ready to show it. And then in February of 2020, 2 months before our first grandchild was born, Warren had a stroke. He didn't die right away. He was with us for another 14 months. But the Warren who came home from the hospital wasn't the Warren who went in, and we both knew it. He couldn't work with his hands anymore. The shop stayed quiet. I would still hear the radio sometimes, because I'd turn it on just to feel like he was in there, but nothing new was ever built. When he died in April of 2021, I went through his shop very slowly and carefully. The way you go through a person's things when you're not just cleaning but looking for what they left behind on purpose. The box was on the workbench, finished. Lid closed. His handwriting on a piece of masking tape on the bottom, for Elliot's first. And underneath that, in smaller letters, "Don't open until you give it. Give it right." I sat on his shop stool for a long time. Then I opened it. Inside, wrapped in a piece of flannel from one of Warren's old shirts, was a letter in his handwriting. His pre-stroke handwriting from before everything changed. The date at the top was December 2019. He'd written it the month he finished the box. I only read the first few lines before I had to stop. It was addressed to a grandchild who hadn't been born yet. It started, "I don't know your name yet, but I already know I love you. I've been waiting for you since your dad was about 8 years old and decided he wanted to be a geologist when he grew up. I knew then that whatever you've turned out to be, you'd have good bones." I folded the letter carefully and put it back. Underneath the letter, also wrapped in flannel, were 2 things. An envelope sealed with electrical tape, Warren's version of formal, and a handwritten note clipped to the front that said 5 and 29. For school. Don't let anyone touch it early. I knew what that meant. Warren had been putting money into a $529 college savings account for years, even before we had grandchildren. He believed in education the way some people believe in church. He used to say the best thing you could give a child wasn't a toy or even a house, it was options. The envelope held the account documentation and the transfer paperwork to add the baby as the named beneficiary. a balance that had grown over 23 years of contributions to just over $60,000. The second envelope held something I didn't expect: a handwritten list of every woodworking tool in his shop, with specific ones marked with a small asterisk and a note beside each one. This one's for Elliot, when he's ready to learn. Warren had always hoped Elliot would take an interest in the shop. He never pushed it, but he'd been hoping. I closed the box. I put the lid back on. I traced the carving with my finger. He'd carved a small compass rose into the lid because Elliot had always loved hiking, had always needed to know which direction he was going. I rewrapped the whole thing in brown paper, tied it with kitchen twine, and set it in my closet. I wasn't ready to give it yet, and I needed to wait until I understood what give it right meant. And his wife, Brenly, bought a house this past spring. A real house, not a starter house. A 4-bedroom in a suburb outside of Charlotte with a big backyard and a neighborhood HOA that sends letters about mailbox consistency. Elliot was proud of it. He called me from the driveway on closing day, and I could hear it in his voice, that specific kind of pride that sounds a little like relief. Brenly's family has money. Not Warren saving carefully for 23 years' money, but the other kind, the kind that's always been there and doesn't feel like anything remarkable. Her mother drives a car I don't know the name of. Her father made a comment at Elliot and Brenly's wedding about the venue being charming in a rustic way that I've been quietly carrying ever since. Brenly herself isn't unkind, exactly. She's efficient. She has opinions about aesthetics the way other people have opinions about ethics. Firmly, with very little room for discussion. Their apartment before the house was all white and gray and glass, and when they posted pictures of the new house online, I saw it was trending in the same direction. Clean lines, no clutter, everything with a purpose and a place. Their housewarming party was in June. 40-some people, catered, in a house that already looked like a magazine. I drove up from Asheville with the box at the passenger seat, tied in its brown paper and kitchen twine, with a card tucked under the string. In the car, I talked to Warren. I do that. I told him I was finally giving it right. I wasn't sure exactly what that meant yet, but I thought showing up with it to the first big celebration in their new home was close enough. When I arrived, Brenly greeted me at the door. She was beautiful and composed and very busy. She took my jacket and pointed me toward the food. I found Elliot in the kitchen, talking to his brother, and I hugged them both. The house was loud and warm, and I was glad to be there. I gave Brenly the box about an hour in. I'd been waiting for a moment when it felt right. Not the center of attention, because that's not what the box was for. I found her in the kitchen and handed it to her and said, "This was Warren's last project. He started it when you first got pregnant. I wanted to give it to the two of you together, but Elliot's in the middle of something. Maybe later, when things settle down." She looked at it. Brown paper. Kitchen twine. A handwritten card. She said, "Oh, how sweet. The way you say it when you're being polite and already moving on to the next thing." Then she set it on the gift table, which was fine. That was fine. I went and got a glass of wine and talked to Elliot's college friend and his wife for a while, and I thought the box would just be there when they opened gifts later, and that would be the right time. 40 minutes later, I walked past the back porch and I saw the box. It was outside, on the porch railing, next to a stack of other things, a plant in a terracotta pot with a small crack, a set of dish towels still in their wrapping, a vase Elliot's colleague had brought. There was a sticky note on the box in Brenly's handwriting. It said, "Donate, rehome." I stood there for long enough that my wine glass got warm. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment, because angry isn't quite right, though there was anger. What I felt first was something closer to vertigo. The sense of a floor dropping out from somewhere you didn't know you'd been standing on. My husband had made that box. He'd carried the hope for that baby through his stroke and his decline and the last quiet year of his life, and he'd died with the finished thing, sitting on his workbench, waiting to be given right. And here it was on a porch railing with a sticky note, because it didn't match the aesthetic. I took the box off the railing. I put it under my arm. I did not go back inside for my jacket. I texted Elliot from the car, had to head out a bit early. "Love you. Let's talk soon." I drove home to Asheville in the dark with the box in my lap and Warren's radio station on, which is mostly what I do when I need to feel like I know where I am. Elliot called the next morning, not that night. I'd wondered if it would be that night, but it wasn't. His voice when he called was the voice of a man trying to hold something together. "Mom," he said. "I saw you took the box when you left." "I did," I said. "Brenly told me she'd set it aside by mistake, that there was a mix-up with some things her mom had brought over." I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "It wasn't a mistake, Elliot. I saw the note." He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, "Was there something inside it?" And that question, asked in that voice, by my son, who has his father's way of getting quiet when things matter, that question is what I've been building toward this whole time. Because yes, there was something inside it. I told him about the letter. I read him the first paragraph over the phone, slowly, and I could hear him breathing in that deliberate way people breathe when they're trying not to cry. I told him about the $529, $60,000, grown over 23 years, that his father had started when Elliot was in middle school because Warren believed you started preparing for a child's future the moment you understood that futures were a thing you could prepare for. Elliot was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said, "I didn't know about any of that." "Your dad didn't tell people about things he was doing," I said. "He just did them." Another long pause. What happens to it now? The account, and this is where I want to be honest with you because I've thought about this a lot, and I think some of you are going to have feelings about what I did. I'd consulted an attorney friend of mine back in Asheville after Warren died about the 529 and the estate and all the paperwork. A 529 account has rules. The money has to be used for qualified education expenses. If it's not, there are penalties. But the account owner, which, after Warren died, became me, can change the beneficiary. I could name our grandchild. I could name Elliot. I could technically name any qualifying family member. After what I saw on that porch railing, I made a decision. I kept the account in my name. I named our grandchild, their daughter, Nora, who is 4 and currently obsessed with dinosaurs and thinks her grandfather Warren hung the moon, which I have been carefully, deliberately ensuring, as the beneficiary. Not Elliot. Not jointly. Nora. With one condition attached in my own will. The funds are to be used specifically for Nora's education, at an institution of her choosing, when she's ready. Controlled and dispersed by a trustee who is my younger son. Not Brenly. I told Elliot this on the phone that morning. He didn't fight me on it. That surprised me, I'll be honest. I'd expected pushback, some version of "that's not necessary" or "Brenly didn't mean anything by it." But he didn't. He just said, quietly, "I understand, Mom." Then he said something that I have thought about almost every day since. He said, "I should have looked at what you brought before I let the party happen around it. That's on me. Dad made that for us and I didn't protect it." I had to put the phone down for a minute. When I picked it back up, I said, "Your dad knew you. He knew exactly who you were when he made that box." The compass rose on the lid. "Do you know why he chose that?" Elliot said he didn't. I said, "Because you always need to know which direction you're going." He said that once, years ago. He said you were the kind of person who needed a fixed point to navigate from. He didn't say it like it was a criticism. He said it like it was the most reliable thing about you. Elliot was crying by then. Openly, which he doesn't do often. I want to be careful here because I know there are going to be people listening to this who want me to say that I gave Brenly a piece of my mind. That there was a confrontation. That someone cried on a porch and learned a lesson in front of witnesses. That's not what happened. I don't believe in that kind of resolution, maybe because Warren never did, and I've been shaped by 38 years of watching someone handle difficult things with a quiet that was never passive, never weak, but was always, always about what you build next, not what you tear down. Brenly and I have not had a direct conversation about the box. I don't expect we will. I think she knows that I know, the way adults know things in families, in that silent and permanent way. At Christmas, she was different with me, not dramatic, just more careful, more present. She asked me questions about Warren, about the shop. She asked if I'd ever learned to use any of the tools. I told her a little. I told her about the summer he tried to teach me to use the lathe, and I was so bad at it. We both cried, laughing. She smiled at that, a real smile, and I thought, this is the beginning of something, if she wants it to be. That door is open. It has always been open. Nora got the box. We gave it to her together, Elliot and I, on her 4th birthday, which I know is young. She can't read the letter yet, but she held the box in both hands, the way little kids hold things that feel important, with that whole-body seriousness that 4-year-olds have when they understand gravity without knowing the word for it. She ran her finger over the compass, rose on the lid. "What's this?" she asked. "That's a compass," Elliot told her. "It helps you know which way you're going." She looked at it for a long moment. Then she said, "Which way are we going?" And Elliot looked at me over her head with an expression I will carry with me for the rest of my life. "We're going the right way," he said. "We just had to find our north." The letter is in a fireproof box in my closet now, next to our marriage certificate and the photograph from our first date that Warren kept in his wallet for 38 years. When Nora is old enough, I'm thinking 12, maybe 13, when you start to understand that the people who love you have histories that run deeper than you can see. I'll give her the letter, I'll sit with her, and I'll read it with her, and I'll tell her, "Your grandfather wrote this before you were born. He didn't know your name. He didn't know about the dinosaurs, or the compass rose, or the way you hold things that matter with both hands. But he knew he was going to love you. He'd been preparing for you for 23 years. That's not something a sticky note can undo. That's not something that goes out with the donations. Some things survive being set aside. Some things survive not being recognized for what they are. Not because they fight for it, but because their value doesn't depend on the person who failed to see it. It was always there. It just needed the right hands to hold it. Warren knew that. He always knew that. He built things to last.